He could barely walk to the oche without gasping for air. He weighed over 400 pounds, and yet he was about to shock the world. Andy Fordham wasn't just a darts player, he was a walking contradiction. A man who drank more before a match than most would in a weekend. A man doctors said might not survive another year, who went on to become a world champion. But how did it happen? How did a pub landlord with failing health, a broken wrist, and a pint in each hand bring down legends, captivate millions, and nearly die on live TV? This is the insane, heartbreaking, and utterly unforgettable story of Andy the Viking Fordham. Before the beer, before the fame, and long before the nickname the Viking, Andy Fordham was something entirely different. He was fast. Born in Bristol in 1962 and raised in South London, Andy was a natural athlete in his youth. On the football pitch, he was lightning. So quick that his mates started calling him the Whippet. Nobody back then could have predicted what he'd become, least of all Andy. But life, as it often does, had other plans. A serious back injury ended his footballing days far too early. With sport gone and frustration setting in, Andy's once lean frame started to change. His metabolism slowed, his appetite didn't, and his weight quietly began to rise. By the time he was 20, he was tipping 13 stone, a noticeable jump. That same year, 1982, he stumbled upon something new: darts. Not as a competitor at first, but as a pub landlord. He'd taken over a local bar with his wife Jenny, pulling pints for regulars and organizing casual matches for fun. But the more he played, the more it clicked. Darts wasn't just a pub game. It was precision, pressure, and poetry in motion. And Andy, with his natural rhythm and calm under fire, had it. That unteachable calm. The hand that never shook, the nerves that never buckled. But if anyone thought he was just in it for the hobby, they were about to be very wrong. Andy Fordham didn't take the slow road to the top. He exploded onto the darts scene like a firework. By the early 1990s, the man who once ran the bar was now owning the oche. In 1994, his breakthrough came. He wasn't just beating local names anymore, he was demolishing international fields. That year, Fordham won both the Finnish Open and the Swiss Open, two respected WDF titles that put him on the map. And he didn't scrape by. In Finland, he beat none other than Raymond van Barneveld in the final. Yes, that Van Barneveld, the man who would become one of the greatest darts players of all time. Those victories catapulted Fordham onto the world stage. He earned the 6th seed for the 1995 BDO World Championship, his lakeside debut. And if people thought he was just a big guy with a good arm, they were about to be humbled. His first opponent? Nicky Turner. It went to a deciding set. With ice in his veins, Fordham took out a 160 finish, a statement of intent. Then he took out Ronnie Sharp 3-2. Then Paul Williams 4-2. Suddenly, the pub landlord was in the semi-finals of the World Championship on his very first try. He eventually fell to Richie Burnett, who went on to win the whole thing. But Andy had made his point. He wasn't a fluke. He was a force. A year later, he backed it up. Another run to the semis. This time taking down Chris Mason, Andy Jenkins, and Colin Monk along the way. Again, he fell to the eventual champ, Steve Beaton, 5-3. But it was clear, Andy Fordham was here to stay. Between those World Championship runs, he picked up other accolades, including the 1996 WDF Europe Cup men's pairs, alongside future legend Martin Adams. But behind the success, something else was growing, and it wasn't just his trophy cabinet. By the late 90s, Andy Fordham was a household name in darts, a fan favorite, a gentle giant with a thunderous throw. But behind the cheers and trophies, something was spiraling out of control: his health. Andy was gaining weight fast, and not just a little. By 1999, he was pushing the 30-stone mark. That's over 400 pounds. His mobility was decreasing, but his form? Still rock solid. That same year, he won the prestigious World Masters, proving once again that when the arrows flew, Andy could still hang with the best. He made more deep runs at Lakeside, reaching the semifinals in 1999 and 2001. But cracks were beginning to show. Early exits followed in 2002 and 2003, and fans began to wonder, could his body hold out? Then came 2004, a year that would change everything. Andy walked into the BDO World Championship that January, weighing a jaw-dropping 31 stone. His shirt? A 6XL, unheard of in professional sports. But if people doubted him, they hadn't learned yet. In typical Fordham fashion, he started strong. 3-0 over Brian Derbyshire. 3-0 over Tony West. Then a gritty decider against Daryl Fitton, who pushed him to the edge. Next came the semi-final, and fate had lined up something special, a rematch against Raymond van Barneveld. Barney went up 4-2, and it looked like Andy was done. But then something clicked. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was just pure heart. Andy clawed it back one set at a time and beat Van Barneveld 5-4. It was one of the greatest comebacks in Lakeside history. But even as he celebrated, whispers started. Could he handle the final? 9 sets was a marathon for anyone. For Andy, it was a war. But he answered those doubts with fire, defeating Mervyn King 6-3 to become world champion. It was the crowning moment of his career, and the beginning of something darker. Because winning the title meant something else, a super fight, a crossover clash with the biggest name in darts, Phil the Power Taylor. It was supposed to be the greatest match in darts history, Andy Fordham versus Phil Taylor, BDO champion versus PDC champion, 2 titans of the sport, one Aki, one Knight. The Showdown. Sky Sports promoted it as the first ever darts pay-per-view, a heavyweight clash worthy of box office treatment. The hype was electric. Fordham was the people's champ, the pub hero turned giant killer. Taylor was a machine, clinical, untouchable, the undisputed king of the modern game. But behind the scenes, Andy Fordham was in trouble. Just weeks before the match, disaster struck. He fell and broke his right wrist. No practice, no prep, just pain, frustration, and beer. Andy joked that he was healing it by drinking 8 bottles of lager a day. That number would double on match nights. Incredibly, he claimed he drank up to 25 bottles of lager and half a bottle of spirits before some games, not to party but to calm his nerves. November 2004, the night of the fight. The Circus Tavern, a notoriously hot venue with low ceilings and lights that turned the stage into a sauna. Tickets were sold. Millions tuned in. The cost? $9.95, and nobody was ready for what was about to unfold. From the moment they stepped on stage, it was clear Andy was struggling, sweat pouring, wiping his face every other dart, his breathing labored, the tension unbearable. Phil took the first set 3-0, looking composed. But then, out of nowhere, Andy roared back, taking the second set and silencing the doubters. For a moment, the magic returned, but it didn't last. He missed a crucial shot to win set 3. Taylor punished him. Set 4? Another war, another loss. By set 5, the exhaustion was written all over Andy's face. He was swaying as Taylor threw, dizzy, drained. Then came the 7th set. Andy leaned in and whispered something to Phil mid-match, something that would haunt fans for years. "I can't breathe." At the end of the set, Andy disappeared. Gone. Off stage, Taylor stood alone, throwing practice darts. Cameras panned. Confusion spread. Then came the chilling update. Andy was outside, gasping for air, clutching an inhaler. Sky Sports tried to keep the show rolling, cutting to filler interviews, trying to stay upbeat. But behind the scenes, it was serious. Andy was dehydrated, suffering with asthma, and dangerously overheated. The heat on stage? Estimated at 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Eventually, the announcement came. Andy Fordham will not continue the match. The match was awarded to Taylor. The crowd sat stunned. There were no refunds. The pay-per-view had run nearly 4 hours, but the fight had ended with a medical emergency. And just like that, the legend of Andy Fordham took a dark, sobering turn. His body had reached its limit, and the darts world had just witnessed it in real time. But what happened next would be even more shocking. After the showdown, doctors delivered a chilling verdict. His liver was failing. Years of alcohol abuse, weight gain, and relentless pressure had taken a brutal toll. If he didn't stop drinking, he wouldn't live to see the next world championship. And Andy, to his credit, listened. For the first time in his career, he publicly admitted he needed help. No more pretending the lager helped him focus. No more brushing off warnings. The man who once joked about needing a crate of beer to calm his nerves was finally ready to make a change. In 2005, Andy signed up for the British reality series Celebrity Fit Club, a weight loss show that paired stars with trainers, dietitians, and a brutally honest camera crew. For a man as private and proud as Fordham, this was a massive step. But it worked. He lost 3 stone in just a few weeks. That's over 40 pounds. And for a while, he seemed like a new man. He said he felt better, healthier, more hopeful. He hit the gym 3 times a week, changed his diet, and told fans he was committed to turning things around. But there was a cost, and not just physical. While Andy was shedding pounds, he was also losing practice time. And in darts, rhythm is everything. The smallest disruption can derail a player. Andy soon realized that reality TV and competitive darts don't mix. In the 2005 and 2006 Lakeside World Championships, Andy was knocked out in the first round both years, a far cry from his earlier dominance. He later blamed his poor form on the distraction of television. The focus on fitness had been good for his health, but bad for his game. Then things got worse. In 2006, his health deteriorated again, but this time he didn't seek help. He ignored the warning signs, convinced himself it was nothing, told himself he'd get through it, like he always had. But in 2007, his body had other ideas. Just 30 minutes before he was due to play in the BDO World Championship, Andy collapsed backstage with chest pains and breathing problems. It took 5 people to lift him onto a stretcher. He was rushed to hospital, where doctors found a severe chest infection and fluid in his lungs. This wasn't just a scare, it was a breaking point. Andy had always been stubborn, always brushed things off. But lying in that hospital bed, with his body shutting down and the sport he loved slipping away, he finally admitted, "I can't go on like this." This was the moment that changed everything. After his terrifying collapse in 2007, Andy finally surrendered to the truth. His lifestyle had nearly killed him. The man who once said he felt fine drinking 20 beers before a match was now facing a brutal new reality. No more alcohol, no more excuses, and no more shortcuts. And somehow he stuck to it. With his life on the line, Andy launched a personal revolution. Gone were the crates of lager and pub lunches. In came early mornings, medical checkups, and long, lonely sessions on the treadmill. The result? He lost 10 stone in 10 months. Eventually, his total weight loss climbed to over 16 stone, more than 220 pounds. To put that into perspective, Andy had essentially lost an entire adult human being in weight. He was unrecognizable, fitter, clearer-headed, and for the first time in years, hopeful. Fans were stunned. Pictures of the new Andy hit the media. And despite all odds, he began to talk about a comeback. It wasn't just talk. In 2008, Andy returned to competitive darts. He knew he wasn't the same player he'd been in his prime, but he didn't care. This comeback wasn't about trophies, it was about redemption. He started playing exhibitions, smaller events, testing the waters. Slowly but surely, he began to rebuild his rhythm. Though he didn't return to dominating form, fans welcomed him back with open arms. He was no longer just a champion, he was a survivor. And then, in 2015, Andy did something nobody expected. At 53 years old, with a decade of health scares behind him, Andy entered a grueling qualifier for the Grand Slam of Darts. Nearly 200 players competed, one spot up for grabs. Andy Fordham, the man many thought would never compete again, won it. He was back on TV, playing on a major stage and holding his own. In the group stages, he beat Wayne Jones and gave Adrian Lewis, a 2-time world champion, a serious run. His throw wasn't quite as sharp as before, but the roar from the crowd? That was louder than ever. The Viking had returned. But as always with Andy Fordham, triumph was bittersweet. Behind the cheers, a familiar shadow was returning, and this time, it would be final. By the mid-2010s, Andy Fordham had done the unthinkable. He'd survived what should have ended him. He'd lost over 200 pounds, faced down addiction, walked back on stage and looked his demons square in the eye. But some battles never really end. Though Andy had reclaimed part of his life, his health remained fragile. Years of damage don't disappear overnight, and as the darts circuit grew faster, younger, and more intense, Andy quietly began to step away again. His weight crept back up. 24 stone by the end of the decade. The pace of recovery slowed. Appearances became rare, but whenever he showed up, whether in exhibitions or as a guest of honor, the crowds still roared. Because Andy Fordham wasn't just a former world champ. He was a symbol of resilience, of heart, of what it meant to fight, lose, and fight again. Then came 2020. Andy underwent bowel surgery, a serious operation, but he recovered well. Hope remained. He still had big plans. He even talked about commentary work, maybe some exhibition matches, lighter roles in the sport he loved. But in early 2021, disaster struck again. Andy contracted COVID-19. With his long history of respiratory and organ issues, it was a worst-case scenario. His condition deteriorated rapidly. On July 15, 2021, Andy Fordham passed away from major organ failure, aged just 59. The darts world was devastated. Tributes poured in from legends and fans alike. Phil Taylor called him one of the nicest men he'd ever met. Raymond van Barneveld said he was heartbroken. And thousands of fans, many who had never even seen him play live, flooded social media with stories, memories, and raw emotion. Because Andy Fordham wasn't just a player. He was us. Flawed, funny, brave, stubborn, kind. A man who faced his worst days in front of millions and never gave up. He may not have won the most titles, but he won the respect of the sport. And in darts, that means everything.